Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, this episode is an interview because it's falling on a Thursday.
That's right.
That's when our interviews fall, and our reviews and roundtables, they fall on Tuesdays. We're going to fill in the rest of the week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We aren't really fulfilling our potential for not doing an episode every single day of the week.
I mean, we still need to cover, the 70s and the aughts and
the aughts,
2010s. Yeah. So
60s, 50s.
we could fill it out.
There's a lot for us to do. Luckily, we have some people to help us do all this stuff, and that's our old friend Chip is back. Hi, Chip.
Hello. It's funny. I think early on in the Dig Me Out days, Jay and I may have talked about doing a hair metal podcast. So maybe that can fill in some of those days.
Yes.
Instead of Headbangers Ball on Saturday nights, you can listen to the Dig Me Out.
I was going to say, that sounds like Dig Me Out Saturday nights.
Yes.
You could, honestly, you could do that live on TikTok, and you'd probably have 10 million people watching you. It is crazy what gets views on TikTok live. Tens of thousands of people, and they're just people. Somebody's like washing their dishes.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's very like TikTok is very much in like the early Twitter, or I know it's been around for a couple years, but like there was a time where like things were very novel, and anybody would just jump in and like do something, and then they'd immediately have and that's how that is right now. I'm getting used to the TikTok world because I'm trying to penetrate its millennial defenses.
I haven't jumped in, I which is rare for me. I'm usually all about anything new,
the
for
best
tech and stuff. But
best part is the people who are Gen X like ourselves are all like are basically like people like millennials complain about Gen X and boomers complain about Gen X for different reasons, and the people who are Gen X are just like, we don't care. That's our whole point. We don't care if you don't like us.
Yeah.
We don't care if we're not acting our age. We don't care. You guys, we were the latchkey generation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, off track, back on track. Chip,
Yes.
Who you got for us this week?
This artist, this singer, fronts a band, and I would say I can't think of another band that has made so much out of based an entire career around bad relationships. I interviewed Christopher Hall from Stabbing
Have you heard
Westward.
of Fleetwood Mac?
Have you dug deep into the Stabbing Westward catalog? Because there's quite a few songs about bad relationships. But yeah, it was Christopher Hall from Stabbing Westward, and it's I would have been happy to talk to him regardless. But I will say, over the last couple of years, Stabbing Westward has here and there played one-off shows. They've done a little bit of touring. It's Stabbing Westward now is really goes back to the original two guys, Christopher Hall and Walter Flakus. Those guys met in high school, like in the mid '80s, and Stabbing Westward actually, which I didn't know, they started like 5, 6, 7 years before their first record came out on Sony or Columbia or whatever label it was.
Columbia.
They had started like in like the mid '80s or mid to late '80s. So Stabbing Westward today is Christopher and Walter, and then they've got a couple other musicians. Some of those musicians, maybe all of them, were in Christopher's post Stabbing Westward band called The Dreaming. He mentions in the interview, and it's one of those things that artists from this period and probably any period run into when a popular successful band breaks up and somebody starts something new, right, and it doesn't have the traction. He said, even though The Dreaming sounded like Stabbing Westward, the lyrics were written by the same person who wrote Stabbing Westward lyrics, the music was sort of the same. People kept asking for Stabbing Westward to reunite, or kept shouting out Stabbing Westward requests during Dreaming shows. And he's like, at some point, he just sort of realized that Stabbing Westward was what people wanted, and so he put Stabbing Westward back together, which is really not really putting back together. It's him and Walter doing stuff with the guys that were in The Dreaming. But they actually have a new record coming out, which, you know, for
Mhm.
someone like myself, I love Stabbing Westward. I love everything, everything they've done. So I was super excited to hear that they were going to put out new music, because it's very easy for all these bands to go out and just play greatest hits, and that's, you know, fans would have been happy to hear that. But their new record comes out, Chasing Ghosts, on March 18th. So depending on when you hear this, you'll either hear it before and be looking forward to it, or you'll be able to dive right in.
And if you're checking out this episode, you may not know we did review A Darkest Days, the album from 1998, in a previous episode. So you can always check on our website. You check the associated episodes, and you'll find it there.
So I did not, I trimmed the interview to send off to you guys. But when the interview was happening, I'm texting Tim and I'm like, hey, do you remember, was it a good or a bad review? Because if it was a good review, I'll mention it. But if it was a bad review, I'm not going to mention it. But I think you said that it was a pretty good review. And so I mentioned, he just sort of laughed, and, good reviews, bad reviews, it doesn't matter to him at this point.
At this point, I mean, it's past. It's you know what I mean? Like, what does he care?
Yes,
we're a couple knuckleheads with a podcast. I mean, we're not going to change anybody's mind about what that record sounds like. So
if you want to put in, another, you already put in the pitch at the beginning, but Stabbing Westward is a band that gets mentioned sometimes in Discord in the industrial category, and are they industrial band or not?
Yeah.
And we didn't really dive deep into that question. I mean, frankly, I didn't ask that question, to be honest, but I think Christopher admits in the interview that, like, he basically followed everything Trent Reznor did. And he actually knew Trent Reznor before like right around the time Nine Inch Nails started. And he'll tell the story in the interview about how, they were hanging out as both of their bands were getting started. But I think he's also the first to admit that they fell into like an alternative audience. So I'm not sure that he would say necessarily that they can only be stamped as an industrial band. They toured with a lot of other bands that were in that alternative world.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of put them with like Filter and, those bands where, yes, they were industrial rock, but they were a bit more balanced than, say, Nine Inch Nails, which felt much more on the industrial side. Like March of the Pigs made sense for Nine Inch Nails. It wouldn't have made sense for a band like this or Filter. Whereas like Filter doing Take a Picture was like, okay, I mean, that's kind of a laid back song that sounds like Jane's Addiction, but I can also kind of see like it fitting into their sound. So
and I just totally messed up. He was not hanging out with Trent Reznor in the early days. It was Rich Patrick. He was hanging out with
Richard Patrick.
He was hanging out with Rich as Filter started. So Filter and Stabbing Westward run very similar paths at the same time.
Gotcha.
And in fact, the guitar player that Stuart Zeckman, who played on Ungod, Stabbing Westward's 1994 album Ungod, was originally working with Rich in Filter, and kind of had that kind of point in the road, decided which way to go, and he decided to join Stabbing Westward.
That makes sense. I noticed one of the guys that's in the band now, I think, is Carlton Boast, and he was in Orgy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I imagine like 80s rock bands, there are like a lot of members that move within and out of these circles because they have similar styles and tastes, and they tour together and that kind of thing. So
yeah. Now the one thing before we get started, I would just say that the new record, I mean, if you're a Stabbing Westward fan, it is right in the wheelhouse. I think you'd have a hard time knowing if this was from 1998 or 2022. It's just it's got that sound.
Excellent. Thanks, Chip. Let's get to that interview now.
All right. So welcome to another episode of Dig Me Out. I am here with Chris Hall from Stabbing Westward. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So I'm a storyteller, and so I have to open with my story, even though this is all about you. You probably don't know me or remember me, and you shouldn't, but back in the Ungod days, I was a music writer. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and there was a Sony college rep in town named Andy Flick.
Andy Flick, yeah.
And Andy turned me on to Stabbing Westward. We actually saw you at the CMJ convention before the record came out, when you opened for Quicksand and Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine, yeah.
And I mean, I just remember that being, I had never heard of you, and he was telling me that you were a new band on the label, and just remember being so excited and impressed. And I kept calling him and like, hey, do you have any promos? Do you have any advanced copies yet? Because I'm ready to hear it. then when the album came out, you came through Ohio quite a bit, and I was always hanging out with Andy, and we spent time, I don't know even necessarily with you, but we definitely spent time with the band, either at the Newport Music Hall. I know that we went up to Cleveland at Blossom Music Center when you played with Depeche Mode. I saw you with Killing Joke. So I've seen you a bunch, and I think I probably hung out a little bit more with Stuart.
Okay.
And Jim, another one of those weird little stories. Jim went to high school with my wife's cousin's wife. So anyway, there's a small
In
world
Ohio,
connection.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to you. But doing a little bit more research, and to me, you were a brand new band. But when you put out the first record, you weren't really a brand new band at that point, were you?
No, not at all. We had been pretty established in Chicago for almost 8 or 10 years at that point. Yeah, it's been a while. We were right there with we would do shows at the Metro and the Avalon with Smashing Pumpkins before they got signed. So we were like right there at the same, not same, well, yeah, we're at the same level, the Smashing Pumpkins at the time before we both got signed. And then clearly they leapfrogged past us quite a bit. But yeah.
I was really into, probably maybe a year or two before you, some of the Chicago bands, the Triple Fast Actions, the Fig Dish, the Veruca Salts, that were getting that attention. Were you getting the same attention at that time?
No, we weren't, because I think industrial music in Chicago was a kind of a double-edged sword, where it was sort of the home mecca of industrial music, yet they didn't really acknowledge local industrial music as being I think that Warsaw had a very similar problem as well, where they were, making music in the same studios as Ministry, but because Ministry were of legendary and mythic status, anything below that was considered like local. It was weird. It was a very, very competitive, weird scene. And I think the Veruca Salts and the other bands, like who else was going? Urge Overkill was from, yeah. And then there's a couple of other rock based bands, like even Pumpkins. I think that they had a more kind of open field for development. A lot more rock clubs than there were, industrial clubs.
Yeah. And there was not a lot. I mean, you played with the Pumpkins, but besides that, there wasn't a lot of crossover with like what you'd call the alternative indie rock bands, the Veruca Salts. Like, did you ever play a show with Veruca Salt?
No, we never played a show with Veruca Salt. We played with Catherine a lot.
Oh yeah.
And Big Hat and Pumpkins were the main, because early Pumpkins were very, very dark. It was very early Cure, like it was just like super Cure, had a bit of like Lush in it. It was kind of 4AD-ish in a way, but way more so than they became more mainstream alternative rock. They sort of became the poster child for alternative rock in a certain way. But before that, they had a very goth kind of feel to them. So we would do shows with them a lot.
Right. So how did the labels come to you? And was it Columbia that you signed with?
Columbia, yeah, but we had 2 or 3 different labels looking at us. 9 Inch Nails, I think, was pretty much the key to it. I think when 9 Inch Nails gains certain level of success, labels, they have that thing where they start sniffing around at a scene to see what's happening. And then when Trent did Lollapalooza, you could definitely tell there was like a buzz going on about it. And then when he did the Woodstock, where they smeared themselves in mud, and it just sort of catapulted to the next level, there was a lot of labels came to Chicago looking for, is there another band like this? And we were kind of, already there. We already had our sound and our thing together and everything. So there were a lot of bands kind of inspired by 9 Inch Nails that formed and tried to like put a band together quickly, but we were already sort of a pre-established act. I mean, we were actually kind of old at that point. Most people get signed at 18 to 20, and I was like 25 or 26 already. So
yeah,
it was just good timing. I mean, 9 Inch Nails' success definitely paved the way for us.
Yeah. So we can talk about the different members and lineups and stuff, but I think a lot of people sort of think, or maybe I'm wrong, but interpretation of the band that performed on the original album is the original band, but you had a couple different members, right? Like the people on Ungod weren't necessarily like the original Stabbing Westward.
Yeah, no, actually half the band on Ungod were people who joined Stuart. So Walter and I formed the band in high school, basically. We didn't go to the same school, but we knew each other from band camp. So we put a band together, and we were always the core of the band. And then we met Stuart when Stuart was in an unnamed band with Rich Patrick at the time. And Rich Patrick went to school with Jim. And so we were hanging out with Rich. And I had toured with Die Warsaw, so I'd known Rich from that tour. And we were hanging out and doing acid in Jello Biafra's attic, Jello Biafra's girlfriend's attic. And we were all sitting around talking. And I think, Chris Renna was with us because he was in Die Warsaw with me. And so we're all just sitting around, hanging out and talking. And Stuart was there with Rich. And we were talking. And Stuart found what we were doing sort of fascinating because him and Rich were doing what became Filter, but it was super rock based. And what we were doing was super synth based. We had a bunch of, at the time, I was going to say vintage synths, but they weren't vintage at the time. We had like, an emulator and Emax, a couple of like a Juno and a Pro One and some stuff like that. But he really liked that kind of stuff. And so, he was playing bass for Rich, but I asked him if he wanted to come play guitar on a track. And because we were just hanging out and partying or whatever, he's like, yeah, cool. And then he played on a couple of tracks. And then the project with Rich kind of hit a snag and it went on hold for a while. So while it was on hold, Stuart came over and played with us. And he ended up writing 50-60% of Ungod was Stuart. And the other half was Walter, the stuff that we had done before Stuart had joined the band. And so, I mean, in a very, very short time, he entered the band and completely changed the sound of the band, the direction of the band. We became way more rock when Stuart joined the band. And it was cool, but it was a shock to us because it was kind of happening to us, and we were excited at the moment, but then we stepped back and looked back and go, oh man, that's the moment that the sound of the band sort of got derailed from the industrial thing that we were doing in Chicago, but it also opened up the door to, signing to Columbia and just having more mainstream hooky songs. So
yeah. And so I've listened now because you re-released or you re-recorded some of the early songs, right? Was it Ewo Jesus? Is that how you?
Oh yeah. That was our original EP before.
But what you've put out are those re-recordings of those songs, or those?
They are re-recordings because no one has the original 8-track recordings. But they're done on 8-track to 1-inch, yeah.
But they're loyal to the originals.
Yes, I tried very hard to be loyal to the originals. I was able to dig up a lot of the samples that we had before. I changed the lyrics a tiny bit to update them just a little bit. Mostly to be clever. And then I tried to use as much of the original production as possible. But it's hard because we did it. The original one was done, a couple of the songs were done on, I think we had an 8-track and we had all of our keyboards and drum machines all SMPTE time code to this 8-track. And so we were kind of like the Beatles at that point. Anything that we couldn't fit on 7 tracks, we had to bounce and create and make, so we had very, very limited tracks. And now I've got this. So I've got this monstrosity of a system. I could do, 200 tracks and just go, I have keyboards and guitars just out the wazoo. I have a drum kit at my feet. Yeah, so the hard part was don't use everything you have. Use what you had then. And that was so bizarrely frustrating. But I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna use a little bit of auto-tune on my vocal because we did have it back in 1994. So I'm gonna just a tiny bit, just tweak it a bit.
So it was interesting to me because you can hear some of the more synthy Depeche Mode related stuff in that, but then you also hear more industrial stuff. So I think, like to your point, Ungod kind of took those two and kind of put them, kind of centered them a little bit in that in-between space.
Yeah, I think we lost a bit of the Depeche on Ungod. I think it became
Oh yeah, for sure.
a bit more rock. And then when Andy joined the band on Wither, I think with songs like "What Do I Have to Do" and "Inside You" and "Why," we kind of picked up on the Depeche sounds again.
Yeah.
Because Depeche Mode was a bad word in Chicago industrial music scenes. I mean, the rumor was KMFDM actually named themselves after, you know, a
Yeah.
dislike of the pop music of Depeche Mode. Personally, I love Depeche Mode. I loved them from the time I was a kid because I love hooks. I love, you know, music you can sing along to. As a singer, you know, I think they're brilliant. Skinny Puppy, amazing musical band, but I don't sing in the shower to Skinny Puppy. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like as a singer, it's like I listen to stuff that is really, you know, melodic and great vocals and stuff like that. So the qualities that I guess, you know, super hardcore tough guy industrial people disliked about Depeche Mode is everything I loved about them. And then when we toured with them and I saw them every night for, you know, 2 years, it was just magical. It's like amazing.
That's what I was going to ask. So how amazing was that with being able to
It
open for this
was,
band?
I mean, to be able to open for them was terrifying
Yeah.
because they had huge crowds and their crowds were, we opened for a lot of bands. We opened for Kiss, and that was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. The crowds were so, they weren't even disinterested. Disinterested is fine, but they were like hostile. Like they were angry that you weren't Kiss. And they
Right.
thought if they could somehow boo you off the stage or scream you off the stage, that you'd walk off and then Gene Simmons would just walk out and start playing right away. And it's like, it's not how any of this works. They're not even here yet. They're not even in the building. So that was a bummer. Sex Pistols was fun, but the Depeche crowd was awesome because they actually love music and they listened to us. And if we were too heavy for some of them, they would respectfully go get t-shirts or something to drink or whatever. So that was great. The best part was getting to watch them every night. Some nights I'd go to the sound booth and watch. Sometimes I'd sit with the lighting guy and watch. Halfway through the tour, I bought a camera and I started taking pictures from the photo pit while they were playing. And then after the shows, we would get to hang out, and Martin and I became foosball partners. So I'd be his goalie, and he would, table football is what they call it, but I'd be his goalie, and we would challenge, you know, anybody in the audience who came back to hang out and party with us. We would challenge the best foosball, and we never lost. I think people let us win because it was Martin, but yeah, I mean, befriending them and getting to watch them perform night after night never ever got old. There were people that followed Depeche Mode around on tour, and I thought, what kind of crazy person follows a band on tour? And then I thought, well, you know what? I could do this every night. I could hang out and watch them play, you know, these songs every single night. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. So you go from that, and then Stuart leaves and Dave leaves, right?
Yes.
And then you start recording. Andy comes in, and you start working on Wither. And Wither, I was looking at Wikipedia, and I'm not sure how accurate Wikipedia is, but the sales numbers between those Ungod and Wither just it blew up. Like, I mean, you went from
Yeah. What Do I Have to Do?
Yeah.
Is what did it. Yeah. So Nothing was our first single on God, and it did okay. We got played on 120 minutes. But it never made it onto mainstream radio. And then What Do I Have to Do came out, and you know, we were able to capture that blend of, like, you know, Depeche Mode and Stone Temple Pilots, you know, with the guitar riff in the verse and the guitars and the heavier drums. It just sort of landed in a right spot with alternative radio at that point. And yeah, that was a pretty big hit. That was a good couple months.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you just mentioned it. It wasn't luck. I mean, you were in the right place at the right time with the right sound that really resonated in the kind of mid to late 90s with people. It was a mix of what was on radio, and it sort of worked perfectly, I think.
We weren't trying though. I don't think anyone had some grandmaster plan of, if we do this, like it was just kind of what we liked. Andy had written What Do I Have to Do? when he was still in the Exotic Birds with Trent. And so he brought this demo to me on cassette. He gave me a cassette that I took to the gym with me, and it had "What Do I Have to Do? Sometimes It Hurts," "Haunting Me," "Crushing Me," "Inside You," and the intro to "Slipping Away." Those were all on one cassette. And they were like partial ideas, kind of developed ideas. They were all Andy singing. And he's got a really odd, ethereal voice that's like not like mine at all. And so I would listen to them and I'd be like, what would I do with this? How can I, how can we make this Stabbing Westward, whatever that is? Identity Crisis has been the number one identity of Stabbing Westward from the beginning. Is
Sure.
Who are we? Are we industrial? Are we electronic? Are we rock? What are we supposed to be? But yeah, that was a magical cassette. That little tape that he gave me, I'm like, dude, you've got a lot of little gems on here just waiting to be turned into tracks. So
Yeah,
that was fun.
I can only imagine. That's another Cleveland connection I have. My neighbors' parents were dentists, and some of their patients owned the Fantasy Theater in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the Fantasy, yeah.
And Andy used to be the bar manager there. And
that's
so
funny.
before Stabbing Westward, during Exotic Bird Days, my friend and I used to go. They let us come to shows early. Like we went to saw Ace Frehley, and my friend's parents didn't want us to get in for free, so we had to go work. And so we would go in and we'd actually check in with Andy, and he'd make us roll kegs from the back to the front and take ice bins. And so it was funny when he joined Stabbing Westward. That was the first I was aware of like Andy as the rock star, not the bar manager who made me haul bins of ice around. So it's pretty cool to see.
So before us though, I think he toured with the for a while.
Yeah,
and then he did like 6 months with Crowded House or something like that. So yeah, he was the guy to call for our kind of music. So when Dave quit, it was a game changer, because Andy joined the band, and not only was he like, Dave was a guy Walter went to high school with. Andy was a guy who went to, the Conservatory of Music and toured with the and Crowded House. So it's like, it was a huge step up, like drummer wise. But then to be handed, like, to suddenly realize, oh my God, this guy's a songwriter who can just like writes all the time, constantly writing hit after hit after hit. So Dave did us a great service by opening the door for Andy. Not saying, but yeah, Andy wouldn't have joined the band if Dave hadn't quit mid tour, and we hadn't, needed somebody desperately to come finish the Killing Joke tour with us, which is how we hooked up with Andy.
Yeah, you guys did a lot of touring in those days, but you were
constant.
But you were also very consistent with putting out a new record every 2 years, which I think is a little bit rare, because like with all that time on the road, having the time to write and record and stuff, I mean, it was a consistent every 2 years you were putting something out, which I'm not sure in the 90s if a lot of bands did something like that.
We were forced to. Our label and our manager would literally pull us off the road. The day our record went gold, the day Wither went gold, we were at a state fair in like Kentucky or Tennessee or somewhere weird that we didn't want to be, and they said, "Oh, your record went gold, congratulations!" And we're like, "Thanks." And our bus is parked in the middle of like a carnival. We're like planning for this show, and it was really weird. And they go, "Okay, your record went gold. You're coming home. We're going to cancel the rest of the tour that you're on. You're going to come home and start writing the next record." Wow. And we're like, "But we're on tour." They're like, "Doesn't matter. We need to get the next record out, and it's going to take a year." It took almost exactly a year by the time that we came home, sat down, wrote the record, and started recording and stuff. It took a while, but yeah, it was an intense 8 years.
Yeah. So Darkest Days did really well too, sales wise. And you toured on that. What happened after that? How did you end up getting dropped, and like what was the surroundings behind that?
It was a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm of Napster.
Oh, right.
The sky was falling as far as the music industry was concerned. Oh my God, people can, download songs and not pay $17 for CDs. But we've been making cassette bootlegs since I was in grade school. We would record songs off the radio on cassette. It wasn't the end of the world. It was that Columbia did like some massive restructuring where they got rid of a bunch of bands, and we actually stayed during the first batch of band droppings. Our A&R guy left for another label, the guy who signed us originally, and we got stuck with another A&R guy who never liked us and never really wanted to have anything to do with us and was just kind of biding his time. And then we we made a couple of tragic decisions as far as management goes, and we got rid of this manager who'd been super awesome to us for 3 records. And we had who was the guy in Lord of the Rings that was it Wormtongue, the one whispering in the King Theoden's ears, telling him all
I think so.
that he needed to team up with Saruman and Sauron and all them. We had one of those, someone saying, "Oh, you guys did okay, but think if you'd done better. Think if like these things had happened, you guys would have platinum records. I mean, look at Filter, look at these other bands, look at Bush. They're so much bigger than you, you know." And we bought into the BS, and terrible decisions made.
It was almost like you predicted it by calling the album Darkest Days before the Darkest Days happened.
yeah, maybe. I don't know. Who names their 4th album self-titled? Like,
and if I understand correctly, like you don't love the way the self-titled turned out.
Hate it. Yeah, hate it.
Are you happy with the songs themselves, though?
The original songs, Walter has always talked about releasing the demos of the songs, because the demos of half the record were pretty cool. They're, you know, dark, you know, standard Stabbing Westward tracks with Mark playing guitar. But, you know, after we got dropped from Columbia, literally on the eve of going to Hawaii to record with Bob Rock, everyone started second guessing themselves. You know, you've got this management saying, "Oh, you guys need to reinvent yourselves. You need to be more pop. You need to be, you know, the kind of music you're doing is dead. You need to do, you know, you need to roll with the times." And my theory was we had 500,000 people who had bought our record between Wither and Darkest Days. They bought both records, and it was only a year ago. It wasn't that long ago. If we just stay true to who we are, and you get, you know, 50% of those people to continue to support the band, that's a win. I always thought that our success during those 2 records was not a fluke, but a bonus. If we could have just maintained a solid, I mean, there's so many bands today that have, you know, 50, 100,000 fans that have really awesome careers, that are constantly able to play good shows, play festivals. You know, you can maintain, you know, a really good fan base like that if you stay faithful to yourself and to your fans. When you try to be something you're not and reach higher, and it's like, it's never good. It's never a good thing. Yeah. So the songs just got self-doubt and other people getting their, you know, opinion, like the producers and stuff like that. Everyone's trying to chime in and change the band, and half of us were fighting it and then begrudgingly going along with it. And it just you can hear that it's not what it was. It's not a band anymore. It was just, you know, we didn't even know the guitar player. The guy was literally brought in without us knowing who he was and playing on our tracks when we weren't there. And we're like, okay, this is no longer a band. This is just, it's like a studio project or something. So yeah, I don't even listen to it anymore. I still think that So Far Away is one of the best songs we've ever written.
Yeah. So
yeah, we still play it live.
I don't know much about record contracts, fortunately or unfortunately, but do you have the rights to those songs? Like if you wanted to put them out in their demo forms or re-record them, or you can't?
No, but I don't think anyone would notice or care. That's the reality of it. Yeah. It's like, no, there's no one at Sony that was there when we were there, so there's no police like walking around going, you know. But I don't see any point. I mean, we're re-recording songs off of Wither. for like as B-sides.
Oh, cool.
And we're doing it because 2021 was the 25th anniversary of Wither, and we really wanted to tour and do like a proper Wither all the way through album. But 2021 went by with us playing one show in 2 years. Finally get the band back together and can't play a show for 2 years. So we had created backing tracks to play the songs live, and I just took those and did remixes of the songs just to create kind of new, interesting, it's sort of a what if we were more electronic? What if we hadn't had, the rock influences? So we're going back and sort of revisiting that stuff, which I find fun, but for the most part, I'd rather just focus on new music.
Sure. After the self-titled, I think the band sort of just fell apart, right? And then
we fell apart during the self-titled.
Okay. I imagine you were still busy, but like I don't think you put out a Dreaming record for a couple of years after that. Was there a little bit of a gap?
There's a big gap. It was hard. It was hard to put a band together. Everyone wanted me to come join their project, but it was really hard to find people to work on music with me. And oddly enough, I made the same, not mistake, but I made the same mistake. That's the word. So, Stabbing Westward is sort of the people that were in the band, other than me and Walter, there was no thought put into it. It was just sort of life happened and people ended up in the band. Like Andy came to fill in for Dave on a tour, ended up staying, for the rest of the time. It's like I have this unique chance to put together a band, that of guys that I like, that I respect, and musically, blah blah blah, and that's shockingly hard. It's really, really hard because the field of candidates in a town the size of Hollywood is tiny. It's like 10 people, 15 people maybe, and I think they were all in my band at one point. And it was at the time when emo and Warped Tour and all that stuff was going on, and I wanted to go old school industrial. And I realize now, like, my jealousy of Trent is the fact that he went his own way, did it himself, and never strayed from that. I was always like, I'm a team player. I want to be in a band. I want to be a part of something bigger than me. And now I'm like, you know what? I just want to do my own music where like no one plays a Scorpions guitar solo across it. Just like, right. I don't want it to sound like Avenged Sevenfold. I want it to sound like, old school late 80s industrial music meets Depeche Mode. I had this vision for what I wanted it to do. And then I ended up with all these amazing musicians and guys that I love, and we created The Dreaming. And it was not anything like what I wanted it to be, but it once again snowballed out of my control. And I'm like, okay, here I am once again, rolling down the hill of fate.
Along with Trent, were you consciously watching Filter and Rich and kind of what they were doing? And I mean, Rich sort of led the same trajectory, right? Where he was the original Filter, Brian, his gang kind of took off, and Rich kept it going and brought new people in and out. Were you paying attention to what was going on with Filter?
Yeah, Rich and I were always friends, so yeah, we were always cheering for Filter. Filter was sort of like the underdog that got out from underneath Trent's shadow, which I thought was cool. Yeah.
So with Filter keeping the name and keeping it going, did you, when you started The Dreaming, was that your point where you're like, I just need a clear split from the Stabbing Westward name, or had you considered keeping the Stabbing Westward name?
Oh no, I never considered keeping the Stabbing Westward name. It didn't feel like it belonged to me. It was like me and Walter's. The thing that I go back and I look back at what happened to the band, and the thing that makes me the saddest is that when the band started falling apart during the self-titled, Walter and I didn't stay together. We didn't team up together and fight for our band, so like Andy and Jim were 50% of the band at that point. And when they decided to break it up, our manager, who was kind of the root cause of the whole thing, sort of laid out the ground rules of how the band would be broken up. And we just accepted those terms, even though I realize now we didn't have to.
Mm.
And we just sort of accepted the inevitable because the goal was to divide up all the property. It was like a divorce. They're dividing up all the gear, all the property, all the rights. And she was, you know, taking our guitar amps and selling them to one of her other bands for dirt cheap. Like they're literally cleaning house on all of our stuff, on our career and our history. And I just shrugged it off. I'm like, whatever, you know. And I just moved along with my life. But I look back now and thought Walter and I should have fought to keep the band, just to keep the name and to keep the band, and to, you know, wait a year or two and then keep it going. But yeah, I see that how Filter kept it going the whole, like they've never ever stopped.
Yeah.
And in a way that's awesome, but in another way, I think breaking up for a while and coming back together created a second wave of interest that would be harder to have maintained for 20 years.
Yeah, good point. As I mentioned before we started recording, Dig Me Out is really focused on uncovering long lost albums that didn't get appreciated. And Stabbing Westward, really, you were in, I don't want to say mainstream, but people knew you. I mean, people knew a Stabbing Westward song when they heard it. You guys did a lot of touring. I know personally as a fan, when I heard Walter joining you in the Dreaming and Walter joining you on stage and playing some Stabbing Westward, like I was, how old was I in 1994, 95? I was in my mid 20s. I got excited, like as an older adult now, hearing the Stabbing Westward name and even the hint of a reunion excited me. So I think maybe to your point, right? Like with Filter, like absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? Like I was ready for it.
Yeah, I do respect Rich for keeping going though.
Was that the kind of feedback you were getting? Is that what led to Stabbing Westward's name coming back and you doing Stabbing Westward? Is that you were hearing people like myself who had missed you for so long? Or was it just a personal thing? You were ready to do it again?
It's got my foot stuck between two drums. It was a resignation that the Dreaming, no matter how hard I worked on it, was never ever going to be as loved as Stabbing Westward, even if the music, in my opinion, was as strong or stronger at times.
For sure.
It's like, you know, no matter how great a song I wrote or how good the production was or whatever, you know, there's just a history and a nostalgia to something from people's childhood, and you can't compete with that. You know, no matter how good a cereal is, if it's not Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, it's not gonna ring your bell. But there's that, and then there's just the brute, hard, cold financial aspect of it, that the Dreaming got $1,000 a night to play a show, and Stabbing Westward could command $10,000 a night, $15,000 a night, and sell way more tickets. And so, you know, two of the guys in the Dreaming, actually the Dreaming and Stabbing Westward for a while were the same band. It was like Johnny, me, Carlton, and Walter, and then Mark joined and Carlton switched to bass. So it was like the Dreaming plus Mark was Stabbing Westward. So how do you explain to these guys, well, I'd rather play these old songs or these songs that nobody knows and make $1,000 to keep my integrity, as opposed to playing these old songs that everybody knows and get paid more money. And at the same time, it's like, well, there's no loss of integrity because they're still the same songs that, you know, they're still, I'm still part of Stabbing Westward. It's not like I'm playing covers or something, you know.
Right.
I didn't join a wedding band, so it was a little bit of a trip for me to get my head around it and to give up and to go back to Stabbing Westward. And there's also some legal stuff. We weren't really sure, you know, where we stood with the name and stuff like that. So then we just reached out to Jim and Andy and asked, "Do you guys want to do this? Because if you guys want to play, we'd love for you to." And Andy's got a thriving business creating music content for TV shows and movies. So he has a studio in Burbank where he pumps out hundreds of songs for DIY shows and reality TV shows and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, I think he's got several people working for him, and he's got like a business going on. And he's like, I don't have time for that. I'm like, cool. None of us do. That's why we play weekends 4 times a year. But yeah, so it was a haul, but it was, you know, once we made the decision, we stuck with it.
Yeah. And because you're always creating. You were always thinking about making new music. It wasn't going to be the Stabbing Westward nostalgia show playing the greatest hits. You wanted to
No,
keep
actually,
releasing stuff.
that's what it was.
Oh, was
That
it?
was the thing. That was the thing that made it hardest for me, is that I never stopped writing music. Actually, after Stabbing broke up, I wrote more music because I
Oh,
was way more active in the Dreaming as a writer and a producer than I ever was in Stabbing Westward. I was the singer, and I wrote, the vocals for a lot of this stuff. Andy wrote vocals too. And then I would get my token 1 or 2 songs per album, Why, So Wrong, You Complete Me, Sleep, stuff like that. Like I would get basically 2 songs per album that I could put on. And so in the Dreaming, I was, full-time producer, writer kind of thing. So I was kind of sad at the idea of, going back to just playing old songs, but at the same time, the thrill that you get, the rush that I get on stage playing, Save Yourself and What Do I Have to Do, and Drugstore and everything. I feel really alive when I'm doing that. It feels really, really good. So there's no regret there. And we tried to play, we did a song called Home for the Cold Waves compilation CD a couple of years ago. And it was a song that we had recorded in 2000 for the self-titled album, but it was considered too heavy for that. And we re-recorded it and put it on the compilation, and we played it live at the show. And I said, does anybody want to hear a new song? And everyone cheered really, really loud. Yay. And so I got all excited, and we start playing it. And about 3 lines into the first verse, I look at the audience, and everyone's head is down, and they're all being lit by their phones, and they're all checking their Instagram and looking at their Facebook and checking their texts and whatever. And it's like, oh, they don't know this song. And I realized, if we write a new album, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be, they act like they want to hear it, but nobody really wants to hear new music. When you're our age, you want to hear what you know. Where it's hard learning new songs, not as a band, but as a listener.
Sure.
It's like,
sure.
It takes focus. You're like to actively. Sorry.
That's okay.
End and accept, hold and accept. No, send a voicemail. There we go. Okay, sorry. Someone was calling me.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Hey there. Okay, sorry.
Yep.
I'm mixing a record for The Hunger out of Houston, Texas. And
cool.
I just sent him a mix right before you called me. And I'm like, let me know what you think of the mix, but not in the middle of the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I dreaded the idea of doing a new record and having, nobody care. But it seems to have been a good balance of it. We played Dead and Gone, the song Dead and Gone, at our Cold Wave show a month ago, 2 months ago. I don't know. When was that? October? Whoa, a long time ago. And people liked it. But I think they'd heard it.
Yeah.
I think it had been out for almost a year. So
this is not, and I hope you don't take this as an insult, but I mean, Stabbing Westward and Chris Hall songs, there's a familiarity, whether it's a new song or an old song. I mean, I've listened to the new album, and it sounds like Stabbing Westward to me. Like there's nothing out there that's like, wait, is this the same band? Is this the same singer? Like you have very distinct.
Yeah. I think my voice is distinct. I think when we did the EP, Crawl and Cold were my productions, and Dead and Gone was Walter's production.
Yeah.
And one of the criticisms I heard, not criticisms, but things I heard was, oh, it sounds like The Dreaming. I'm not sure this sounds like Stabbing Westward. It sounds like The Dreaming. And then when we did, what was the other one we did? When we did the Halloween thing, we did the Halloween cover little EP. I got a similar thing where I did Burn and Halloween, and Walter did Killing Moon, and everyone's like, oh, Killing Moon sounds like Stabbing Westward. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Walter, who wrote Save Yourself and Waking Up Beside You and Violent Mood Swings and Lies and all those songs, So Far Away, he's the sound of Stabbing Westward, and I'm the voice of Stabbing Westward. I'm Dave Gahan. I get it. I'm okay with that. So yeah, so on the new record, I was, careful to not let myself get too, I think I have the same like 3 songs on the record rather than, like I didn't overdo it. I tried to give Walter a ton of space. I haven't actually even heard the album.
Oh,
like
really?
him and John did most of the record by themselves, and I haven't actually listened to it yet. So yeah, hopefully I'm not on it enough that it sounds like a Stabbing Westward record.
What I absolutely love is like the first 10 seconds, the I don't know, keyboard synth of I Am Nothing.
Oh, that's me. Thanks.
I don't know how to describe it other than like in a good way. Like the intro is just like it's nasty. Like I love like, it's
thanks.
Like you set the tone right from the beginning. I'm like, oh man, I'm already bought in the first 5 seconds. So
thanks. Yeah. That's my Sequential Circuits Prophet X.
Very cool.
I got really into like old school since this record. I got tired of Omnisphere and Serum and plugins. I'm like, I want to get actual keyboards that I can actually turn the knobs on old school. And then you can sit there and go, turn the knob and like get it like really tweaking. But yeah.
So I know Walter is a DJ or program director, or he's got a radio career.
Yeah.
How does that affect? So I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, that there's a tour coming up.
Tour? I don't think there's a tour coming up. We're trying to put dates together. It's actually a shockingly hard time. It's not shocking. It's a really hard time to book shows because we booked every time a surge ebbs, we will optimistically book a bunch of shows, and the next surge comes, and we are erring on the side of like safety. We're not. I know a lot of bands that are just like, fuck it, we're going out. They don't care. Well, I have to care. I have 2 little kids at home, and I'm 56 years old, and we can't just. We didn't know what the risks were. We didn't want to risk it, and our fans are all older, and this is pre-vaccine at that point. So I don't want to be. It shouldn't be political, but yeah, we were just worried about our families, and plus Bobby, our drummer, teaches. He runs a drum school, so he's got 300 kids between the ages of 4 and 9 that he teaches drums to, and he can't risk bringing that home either. Sounds like we're talking about an STD or something. But yeah, so we had to cancel a bunch of dates, and it just got to the point where until we know that we can do something, it doesn't make sense to book stuff. We're doing some Northwest dates in July, maybe. We're doing a benefit concert in Chicago at the Metro for Charles Levi, the bass player from Throco Cult, who had some serious medical problems and he's got astronomical medical bills. So we're going to go play Metro and raise money for him. But yeah, I don't know when we're going to tour. And even if we did, it's still got to be weekends because I've got 2 little kids. I'm not gonna leave. My 6-year-old got Student of the Month this morning. And we found out yesterday, like, come to the town hall meeting. It's like they have this like big meeting on the playground on Thursdays. And, sometimes parents will hang out and watch it from the fence. And they're like, come to the meeting and watch. You're going to have a surprise. And he won Student of the Month. And that's huge. And if I was on tour, I wouldn't see that, And
absolutely. Yeah, that's what matters. And
it is what matters to me.
Makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, we're going to try and play weekend shows and stuff. I just don't know when we can, because now that we actually want to play shows, every venue is booked because every band's been sitting on their hands for 3 years. So every band in the world is desperately fighting for the same venues, and half the venues closed during COVID. So there's a lot of places not even open anymore. So it's getting pretty competitive.
I will put in a plug. There's a new club in Columbus, Ohio that actually opened right after the pandemic called the King of Clubs, and it's really their sweet spot is 80s hair metal and 90s alt rock. So like Everclear's playing there. Cool. Non-Point is playing there soon. So if you happen to come to Columbus, Ohio, that would be the ideal venue. I got 2 sort of maybe quick questions. And one thing I didn't think about earlier when we were talking is, you guys ended up on a lot of soundtracks as I was
We
going
did.
through. So your music was out there in other non-traditional ways. You were showing up in movies
Mhm.
and stuff. Was that just an added bonus, or were you fighting to get or your manager fighting to get you, or the labels fighting to get you, or is it?
I think Sony. I think a lot of that stuff was Sony. It was being on Sony was it was a powerhouse. You know, Columbia was a powerhouse label at that point. I you know, I have gold records on the wall, but
Yeah.
I didn't earn them. Columbia earned them. The guys at Columbia, Josh Sarabin, our A&R guy, and all the radio promotion people, they're the ones that got the gold record. I mean, we just wrote the songs and played them live, but they're the ones that
Sure.
went out and did the hard work. So yeah, they were monsters over there, just getting us in soundtracks and getting us on the radio, and they'd make us do these horrible promotional things where we'd have to get up at 5 a.m. and do the morning show and try and sing acoustic, even though my voice is ragged from singing the night before. And they would make us go do like, you know, barbecue cookout events and like just dumb. I'm like, why are we doing this stupid shit? And it was because it was for the radio stations,
Sure.
and the radio stations would play our song, and we would come and do these like silly things for their winners or whatever. And all that stuff added up. And at the time, we were like, you know, snot-nosed little kids that thought we were too cool for school. But I look back on it now and it's like, that was the hard work that they did and we did in order to make it all happen. And fans don't see that stuff. They see, you know, guy on the stage or the video or whatever. But yeah, they were the ones that put in all the hard work, not us. What was the question? Soundtracks. Sony got us all the movies. Yeah.
And so kind of to close it up, I've been doing, this is now my third or fourth interview for the series. And I know the 90s were a long time ago, but as a reflection, if you think back, if I ask you to sum up the 90s from your experience, was it good? Was it bad? Highs and lows? Do you have a lot of good memories, or like how would you wrap it up in a nice little couple sentence? The 90s.
I mean, the 90s were, you know, basically the center of my universe, my life, but also a black hole at the center of my galaxy. It was a whirlwind. I mean, we were constantly on tour or writing a record, and everything was in constant turmoil. I never had a solid place to live. It was crazy, and while I was in it, I don't think I appreciated any of it because it was happening too fast. And then when I got out of it and I looked back, I was like, oh, that was weird. And Walter has a vivid memory of every event that we did, like every show that we did, every venue, every person we ever met, where every Starbucks is in every town ever. And mine is kind of a blur, like more of a collage. It's like you know, the highs were definitely, you know, Reading Festival, opening for Depeche Mode, being at Martin Gore's wedding. Just a lot of it's the friends we made and the people we met and stuff like that. But it's kind of a blur. I'm an 80s kid. My favorite music is all 80s. It's not 90s. I don't listen to 90s rock. I listen to 80s.
Yeah.
80s new wave.
So I think this is the thing that hosts typically do to close it out. What do you want to plug? Websites, Bandcamp? I don't know how you feel about Spotify these days.
Right. Right.
Your chance to plug and where you want people to find you and what you want people to do once they find you.
I don't care. If they're listening, yeah. I mean, we're on Bandcamp, Stabbing Westward. We've got new music out, and then we've got some old stuff up there too. Yeah, go search for us. We're definitely on Spotify. You can go back on Spotify and hear the songs that we were talking about earlier. From a lot of people still don't know about Ungod, so I'd say go check that out because that, in my opinion, is the best of our 4 albums.
Cool.
And it was the least selling one, but I think it was the best one.
Very cool. Well, appreciate you taking the time, and good luck on the new record and the success of it, and hope it all works out that you do get to hit the road.
We'll get to play shows eventually, I'm sure.
Awesome.
We'll see when. Thanks for talking to us.